All right, Music 206. So this is another video about the granulator. And again, basically what I'm doing in this video is reviewing everything we did in class today so that you can go through it step by step when you're in the lab or on your computers at home if you want to see how I did something. I know I covered a bunch of stuff today, but this is kind of a more definitive, like you can rewind it and check it and do what you want. So anyway, so once again, the two things that I'm going to talk about today are how to bounce a track in Logic, right? So we had talked about Logic and importing audio. And so I'm going to explain how I take some MIDI or some sound in Logic and use it and convert it into an audio file so that I can use it in my granulator, right? Which can be really cool if you're trying to do a single sound or whatever. It's a way of converting that sound into an audio track. So to start off with some of the things that I talked about today, the biggest one that I talked about specifically was expanding a sound to make it louder, or to expand the pitch spectrum of something, right? So I did this little trick where I recorded something in Logic, a string sound, and then in my granulator, I took that sound and kind of did some weird expansion of it, right? So I'm going to take this studio string violin sound, and actually I'm going to take it up an octave. Sorry, tool palette. Oh, I got to close this keyboard. There we go. Take it up to a high note because I want to do kind of that really eerie sound. When pitches divide, you get a bunch of different frequencies on a single note. So how I do this is I have my note here, right? It's just a sustained pitch. And what I want to do is take this note and convert it into an audio file, okay? So the easiest way to do this is to what's called bouncing in place, okay? If I go up here to the File menu, and I pull down and go all the way down to Bounce. And what I need to do is choose the Bounce project or section, okay? So what I'm trying to do is bounce part of my track. Now, I only have one track here, so this should be pretty easy. You shouldn't really need to make changes in here, but you might have to set the boundaries correct. You can see on my endpoint of mine is measure 9, which is correct. That's the end of my track. The start is 1111, which is the beginning. I'm going to make an AIF file, which is a standard audio file, in 24-bit, 44.1, totally fine, interleaved, okay? So, and I'm also going to do an offline bounce, which means if you do online, real time, that means it's going to play back the sound and record it. And you can do that. Actually, it's just a single sound. It wouldn't make any difference. So from this, I say OK. Click OK. And then I'm going to get a dialog box saying, OK, where do you want to save this bounce? And I'm going to pick the desktop. And again, I'm going to call this, maybe I'll call this high strings. All right, I'm going to say bounce, and it'll take 2 seconds here to bounce this. Okay, so now basically whatever Logic did in that sound, it's going to play back. So I could have recorded a piano, I could have recorded anything in MIDI. You could take assignment 3 and record that and then run it through the granulator and see what you get, right? So there's just endless things you can do with this. So now I'm going to just close Logic because I'm done with that. Don't save. I'm going to go to my desktop, and the easiest way I'm going to do that is through the Finder, because then I don't have to navigate over to here. I'm going to go down to Desktop and find my audio file. It's called, I'm going to put these in alphabetical order, it makes it easier. It is called, what was it called? Strings, right? What did I call it? I don't remember now. Sweep, no, it's in here somewhere. High strings, there it is. So, and again, all I'm going to do is drag and drop this out here, right? And there's my audio recording. Now, notice, this is actually a cool moment to take a look at this. Notice that half of my audio file here is empty, right? And it's because half of my region in Logic was empty that I recorded from. So remember that if you leave this in here, it will also select moments in time where there's no sound, right? So I'm going to highlight this so that I make sure that every grain has some sound in it, if I were to select the whole thing, I have almost a 50-50 chance that there's going to be no sound, right? Because half of this audio file is empty and the rest of it is full. So in order to avoid that, I'm going to select the bulk of this sound like this, all right? Now, as I mentioned in class, lots of reverb and lots of delay helps to make things nice and soft and kind of mush together. It just makes for a better mix. I'm going to have my grain rate really high, and let's hear what this sounds like now. I'm going to hit play. So a couple of things. Remember, to make this make sound, I go down here, I turn the DSP on, so you can see now it's on. And actually, it had already been turned on, so it made a sound. I'm going to hit on. Okay? So, and what I want to do is, I want to fix the pitch here to normal speed. Okay? So now my grains, I'm going to make them a little longer maybe, just to make it really smooth. Okay? And then remember what I did was I went in here to chords and changed this actually to random frequencies. All right? And then I set this again to as close to 1 as I could get. That's probably really close, maybe as close as I'm gonna get actually. And then what I did was I slowly spread this out to make it bigger, right? And then it's gonna slowly start adding frequencies on the left and the right side, lower pitches and higher pitches of the original pitch. So I just increased the grain length a little bit because it was sounding a little choppy, right? And remember, as the grains get higher, they get shorter too. So sometimes that length needs to be stretched out in order to accompany that, to get away from that. And again, I could have been recording in real time, right? While I'm manipulating this, I'm recording at the same time, and then I get this effect where I'm creating this sound, right? It's kind of a neat sound. So anyways, kind of neat. And again, I also mentioned the scattered, right? Which was the different types of panning that you can do. The LFO is going to modulate back and forth, right? This is just going to sweep back and forth. And then the random is actually going to do exactly what you expect. It's going to randomize panning. I think it's every 3 or 4 seconds. I can't remember. The panning just picks somewhere else and plays, and it's totally randomized. So especially when you're running 2 of these at once, the random panning can do some neat stuff in order to kind of create a cool mix. And then, as I mentioned, my favorite is scatter, okay? And scattered means that every single grain gets a predetermined random panning setting. And so every single pan will sound different. Every single note will sound different in the panning field. Okay? So, kind of interesting. What else? There's also the filter that I talked about. This is a way of actually filtering. If I click on these down here, they give me presets. This is the high pass filter. This is the low pass filter. And I can grab this thing to move the note around and listen to how that changes. Right? Obviously, this is a very high sound. So it creates that kind of high, it's not really changing it a whole lot. And I can also hit random here, and you can see what random does. It's randomizing where that pan, it's actually using a function called drunk, where it's kind of meandering a little bit over time. So you kind of get some slight variation in the pitch, right? Or not in the pitch, in the frequency band, which can give you some cool effects, okay? LFO does exactly what you expect. It's, again, LFO stands for low frequency oscillation, right? So you can see my filter now is oscillating back and forth at a low speed, and I can turn the rate up if I want by using this slider. So if I slide this around, my oscillation is going to change. Okay, so that's how basically how this works, the oscillation. So, excellent. So let's talk now then about the other things that I talked about. Okay, so I'm going to now talk about time stretching, okay? Using a time stretching effect to create that stretching effect that I showed you in class, all right? And what I did was, again, remember, I selected a song, so let's stop this. And you know, you can literally use any sound you want, but it kind of really works really well with music. So let's listen. So this is actually a track that I'm working on right now, and let's listen to this. Let's use that track. Now that you've heard a little bit of it, you kind of get a sense of what it sounds like, and we're going to do this time stretching effect to this, right? And it's a really cool effect and not hard to create. So remember, the first thing you need to do is that most likely you want this to play at a normal speed. Now you may not. You may want it to scatter all the grains onto different pitches, right, in the transposition, or you may want it to be fixed on normal speed. So I'm going to switch the random frequencies here, and I'm just going to actually just choose fifths and octaves. And then if I click on this, it has to be on, by the way. This can be adjusted till it says 1, all right? And now it's going to play just the original pitch of this track, right? And I'm going to now be able to sweep through it. So remember I mentioned this before, that if I turn this on and I click on this one time in this window, then that one moment will be frozen in time, right? It's going to repeat that one moment over and over and over very fast. And the faster my rate is and the longer my length, the more overlap there is and the more it just sounds like a continuous sound. It doesn't sound like individual grains. It sounds like a continuous sound. So let me unmute this. Okay. Now this is a little choppy, so I'm going to increase the grain rate. That's a little too fast. And I'm going to change the length too. So there's a fair amount of percussion in this. Not at the beginning though. The percussion is what's giving it that kind of harsh, almost, I don't know how to describe it. It sounds like a metallic sound to it, right? That's because of the percussion in there. So what I want to do now, remember, is I want to make this cursor here sweep back and forth, right? I want it to sweep through this at a rate. So what I have to do is go up here to off, where the cycle is, and turn this on to cycle or an LFO, all right? It's funny, for consistency, I should probably rename this to LFO because that's what's really happening. And if I turn the rate up a bunch, you're gonna see that what's happening, right? It's sweeping through the audio file and playing individual moments, okay? Now this is gonna be way too fast. Let's listen to this. So, I mean, this is almost the same as if I just select it all, right? It's random. It's happening so quickly that it's kind of randomizing all over the place. So what I actually want to do is take this, I want to change the selection width to be really low because I want it to choose just a narrow band of sound. And then I want the rate to be incredibly slow, okay? So almost so you can barely see this moving, and listen to this now. So this chord is sustaining. Now it's about to move. It's moving so slowly. I'm going to speed the rate up a tiny bit. That's a little better. Yeah, that's quite beautiful, isn't it? You hear my filter sweeping there? That's kind of an effect I'm using. So, yeah, so this is basically what I'm doing, right? I'm sweeping through this song so slowly, it's creating this cool effect. Here's the drums about to start. It's funny the way drums materialize in here. It's very weird. But it's kind of a cool effect too, okay? So anyway, so that's how I did the slowing down effect, right? I created this incredibly slow effect over time. You can also try stuff like taking the pitch down an octave, down another octave. So 0.25 is going to be 2 octaves lower than normal speed, and pitch, I mean. So anyway, it's kind of cool. So that is that basic effect, okay? So the last thing I talked about then too was using the low frequency oscillator here to create some effects that are more tuned to everything, right? So one of the reasons I created this section was it's impossible for me to turn both of these knobs at once, right, while it's playing. So I linked them all to a singular LFO where if I turn link on, link the length, and link the rate, and link the transposition, I can have the transposition change over time like this, okay? Now I would probably need to set this to like chromatic to get that oscillation to work properly, and it's off right now. So if I turn it back on, you can see the transposition now is changing too. So a thing to remember too is that the width, how much it oscillates, is controlled here. And this is the rate of that oscillation. So if you're trying to create a funky effect where your length, your rate, and your transposition are all connected, you can do that pretty easily with this effect, okay? And then remember, the global one in the center is linking everything together, and it only works if I turn it on, but that's how you can link number 1 and number 2 together, okay? So that's kind of a funky thing going on there. Let's turn it up a little bit. So that's a little weird, you know, it could work in a soundscape of some kind. I really love those chords I played at the beginning. Those were way more beautiful. Anyway, so that is it for this tutorial. I'm basically covering again what I did in class and just showing you how to do it yourself. If you wanted to do this time stretch, man, to me this is an easy way to create a really cool backing track for your soundscape, for your Halloween soundscape. You create this basically washing, moving track over time, and then you add, you know, that very slow modulation or oscillation from the cycle object, right? This is just moving very slowly. And again, I need a really narrow width, 28 milliseconds it's in width. And then I need a very narrow, or very low rate so that the oscillation is really small. Now this width could be a little wider maybe. Let me turn this thing off too. Go to off. If I set this back to 1, not random frequency, major scale, let's try major scale. There's 1.